Thanks to our Patreon members for helping to make this episode possible, and we're now available on all the major podcasting platforms. You can find more information at the links below. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to House of the Intellect, Dignity and Integrity. Now, the key for what I want to discuss now is, having introduced the idea of the House of the Intellect, is again, it is a way of being. It is not any particular content or license or, position or degree. There is nothing that can confer on you from the outside a position within the so-called House of the Intellect, because it is simply a way of being, and that when enough people or a group of people behave this way, then you can form a community, and that community continues and ties you into an intellectual, artistic stream that has been running since the foundation of civilization. And so what we want to focus on are those aspects of behavior, of outlook, of attitude that have historically contributed to and been associated with members of or participants in the sort of mode of being that constructs the House of the Intellect. And I think of very critical importance, particularly in today's world, is dignity and integrity. I was going to do separate ones. I mean, they're so closely related that I couldn't really sort of separate them out. So I just thought I would put them in together. And, definitionally, dignity is easier, I guess would be the way to say that. Easier is the state of being worthy of honor and respect. And so one is to confer on ourselves dignity. I think too often what we're told is that dignity is conferred on you from the outside, right? That you're going to get this sense of dignity. But I think this is wrong. Not that you can't have acknowledgement of dignity and be treated with honor and respect, but that the beginning of that, the core of that, is that we treat ourselves with dignity and respect. And as part of that, and as an extension of that, is integrity, which means, not cheating, and being faithful to our own principles. Of course, really, treating yourself with honor and respect is to not violate your own principles and to cheat on them, because, of course, you're being undignified to yourself, right? So this is why I feel that they're so closely interrelated. And one of the problems is, and I think one of the things that people struggle with is, as far as I can see, this is a concept that has completely been lost in the contemporary world, that we really do not value personal dignity any longer. And I don't think, it's not in a conscious way. It's not like our society said, oh, let's rubbish everybody. But I think more or less this is what we've come to, is that all over the place we do not see opportunities for, or we do not extend a sense of dignity and respect to others, nor do we tend to do this to ourselves. And it's very easy to point to the education system because, it's so obvious it's almost not worth doing. So I'll just mention it briefly and then run on to some other ones that I think are less obvious. But, when you're asked to continually fill out multiple choice questions, this does neither honor nor respect your capacities as an individual, your ability to think, your ability to imagine, your peculiar, particular, specific knowledge. What it asks you to do is to sacrifice your sense of self for some other end. And does that end give you a sense of dignity and respect? Well, to the extent that some end has meaning for you, then that may be worthwhile and that may help you feel a sense of honor and respect. But I think increasingly people have felt that the system is simply, when you're just jumping through hoops, then you may successfully jump through the hoops, but it does not give you a sense of integrity, and it doesn't give you a sense of, oh, I've really accomplished something other than I've accomplished something trivial and meaningless, but hey, okay. And so rather than having this sense of profound self-respect that comes from great achievement, achieved with integrity, you get this just sense of, well, that box got checked off, right? It's sort of like, waiting in line or something. Well, I didn't want to, but I did, and so now I'm at the front of the line, so I guess that's good. that kind of sensibility. And so often now school and education at every level has become this much more mechanical process, and much more sensibility of, just go through the motions and everybody will be happy. I mentioned it before when the German department, the graduate school German department. So you would think, wow, we're getting into the nether reaches where you would expect the house of the intellect to be flourishing. When I was at Indiana University, when I had taken the German requirement for graduate studies, which I had to have 2 languages to get my PhD, and I said, wow, okay, I just spent a year studying German. I want to learn more. And they just didn't understand what I was asking. They kept telling me, no, you don't need any more. And I'm like, well, I know I don't need any more, but I just spent a year and I'd like to keep going. I'd like to keep studying. I'd like to improve my German. And they were just baffled. They just had never heard this before. And they just kept telling me like, no. And I'm like, oh, it really was just a box that was going to be checked. So I don't feel good about acquiring the German language and access to German texts and like, oh, this gives me, history of philosophy and ideas and, all the great things that come with learning and really profoundly grasping another language. No, this was not about any of that. It was about checking a box and it looks good on paper. And this is the sort of subtle but profound distinction between, oh no, people have cheated on these things before. It's always been, but the ideal at least was there of saying, oh no, if you really want to, we'll make this opportunity available because we believe in this, because, we're the German department at a major American university. But when the department itself is baffled by what you're asking, then you realize like, wow, we've really come to a bad place. They can't feel good about it, by the way. They've lost dignity and respect as an institution, as individuals within the institution, because they now know, oh, I'm just getting a paycheck, I'm checking boxes, everybody else around me is checking boxes. And so what happens is you transform into this mindset where I think everybody else is also cheating. Everybody else sort of lacks integrity. Nobody else has this sense of personal dignity. And so how could they confer it on me? And I don't see it as a pattern of behavior and belonging. And so it's like, oh, like, nah, like this is not a positive feedback cycle. And so that sense of personal integrity and dignity around intellectual or artistic, musical kinds of literary pursuits just vanishes. And you see this in the literary world and with all these books on publication, which emphasize, how to get an editor, how to get your book in print, how to make a good title, how to do it. Check. Again, it's a bunch of boxes you check. And if you weave your way through the needle correctly, then theoretically on the other side, you'll get your book in print. I've only ever seen a very rare number of times in all these ones I've looked at where they just make the obvious point, which is, well, write with personal dignity, respect for yourself and your ideas, and with integrity. Don't take shortcuts. Believe in yourself, believe in your content, and that's the most important thing. They're like, if an editor says you need to change it to publish it, you should probably change it. Right, which is not necessarily, not even saying that the editor is wrong. It's just when do you say, no, for my personal integrity, for my sense of my own worth, and for respect for what I'm producing, I'm going to say no. Like, no, this is I've written what I want, and I've written it in the way I wanted. I did not take shortcuts. I didn't try to, steal somebody else's ideas or something like this. I spent a long time pondering the sentence structure. Why on earth would I allow somebody else to come in and tell me what to do? That makes no sense. And again, I'm not saying that when, there's just this hardcore absolutist position. No, it's just like, it's not even considered as a value, right? It's not even like, well, how do you know when the editor is being helpful? And how do you know when this is just a complete corruption of what you believe in or what you are trying to accomplish, right? These kinds of questions. No, it's almost all, again, mechanical or functional towards some other goal. And the goal, of course, is, oh, well, if I publish a book and, good Lord, and if that book sells well, then I will have arrived. Then I will be in that place where I have, where I can feel respect to myself and people have to honor and respect me. Unfortunately, unless you're sort of a sociopath, I guess, The unfortunate social truth is that if you've done work that you don't respect and you don't believe in, and you know you've done all these shortcuts and made all these compromises, and then people think it's great, one, they're going to want you to write more of this, which of course is a type of poison. And two, this will make you very cynical. This doesn't make you feel good. This makes you feel cynical. You're like, oh, great. So I cheated and cut corners and wrote crap, and now they like it. Okay, good. So people are suckers, right? So, okay, fine. I can turn out crap and people are suckers. So wonderful. Right? This is not the path of integrity or dignity, right? Maybe it's the path of success and fame, which is fine, but it's not the path of integrity and dignity, and not what you would expect to find or helpful for the construction of the house of the intellect. But I want to extend this just beyond this, the obvious sort of more obvious like education and literary or artistic world, because I think it is pervasive in our society. So if you look at something like fast food, it used to be, and I've talked to you. It's one good reason to talk to older people, although as the years go by, I'm becoming more of the older person myself. But, you talk to people who are 70, 80, 90 years old, and you go, and they will tell you, some of them have told me, so when I was a kid, when I was growing up, the first job I got was at McDonald's. And to work at McDonald's, you had to have a certain GPA, and you had to be selected. And so it was kind of a privilege. It was an honor. You felt good about going there and doing work, and you felt like you were providing quality food to people. And people going to McDonald's when going out was much rare, and fast food was kind of new. It was kind of a special event. This is a completely different relationship, theoretically the same job. But fast forward to today, and I worked at a fast food restaurant, which was an amazing experience in so many ways. And what you realize very quickly is, as time has gone on, and I can't even imagine today, this was, 30 years ago, but even today it looks worse, but bad enough when I was there, it's all about eliminating the individual. It's all about dehumanizing the process. Nobody is pretending like you're providing quality food. You're just providing it fast. No one pretends like they care what you're doing. In fact, everything about the preparation cycle is designed to eliminate any input from the person who's working. They really, really want you to be a robot. This is the ideal. They don't want you to interact with the customer. They don't want you to create a recipe. They're not interested in any of this. They want you to work as much and as much like a automaton as possible. And because you're producing something of low quality and that you're being poorly paid, and then not just saw, I've experienced, they try to rob your hours. They don't give you the necessary breaks. They cut corners in every possible way. It's an environment not of dignity and integrity, but one that encourages you to self-loathing, right? That tells you in every day, in every way, that you don't matter. And that we're just going to exploit you because you don't matter. And ipso facto, your response to this then, and the response that I watched around me, was great. We recognize we don't have any self-respect about being here because we have no opportunity to have self-respect. So we're just going to fuck around in every possible way. We're going to steal food. We're going to cadge money if we can. We're going to give our friends free food. We're going to make the food wrong. There's so many different ways. We're going to, book extra hours. Just on and on and on, right? And so you're in this war of exploitation and automation and the human resistance to those forces. But nothing about this reinforces a sense of dignity or integrity in one's work. Similarly, I saw this less badly, but in some ways equally problematic in the construction world. And you could really almost break it down into two parts. Of course, there's always a continuum, but you had lots of contractors and builders and tradespeople I ran into and worked with that were very high with dignity and integrity. Like, this is what they were doing. They wanted to do quality work. They wanted to make something that lasted, that within whatever their context was, they thought was meaningful and valuable. And these tended to be very impressive people and doing, great work. But there was obviously huge pressure, particularly when you get to like sort of tract home construction and this other side of the construction industry, not so much in custom building. where it is all about speed, minimum cost, maximum return. We don't care about quality whatsoever. Get in, get out, get it done, get your paycheck and go, because this is what we're all about, mass and fast. And again, not only is the product bad, but what the impact that it has on the individual is to suck their sense of dignity and self-worth and integrity away. And so the way so I see this, by the way, if you ever, my shorthand now after work construction for many years is flashing. So flashing is what the metal strips and sometimes other materials, but usually metal strips that you put up to prevent water from getting in various places around windows and roof seams and foundations. There's all kinds of flashing everywhere. And because water is the number one enemy of the building, I've basically come to the point where good construction equals good flashing, because good flashing keeps water out, and water is the enemy of buildings. So it's just sort of, that's it. Like if it's well flashed, it's probably a great building. If it's poorly flashed, that's a big red flag. But customers don't know about flashing, and you don't see it. And so it was like this great check. When I see construction, anytime, something half finished, somebody working on a job, immediately my eyes go to this, because it's like, oh, it takes time. It's a little expensive because it's metal, but it's not really that expensive. So it's a good test, because it's not like a huge sum of money. It's just a question of care and integrity. And when you see workmen doing quality flashing, you're like, those are almost certainly quality people, because the homeowner almost certainly doesn't know, or the shop owner or whatever, and it's invisible because you almost always cover up all the flashing, so they can't see how much or what quality job you did. It's like an invisible but super important thing. And to me, this is sort of a metaphor when you think, I know this doesn't seem like it has anything to do with the house of the intellect, but maybe it doesn't. But to me it does, because it is this bigger picture of doing whatever it is with dignity and integrity. This doesn't just extend to the house of the intellect. It has to do with everything that we do. But it's particularly important in our world because so often it's stripped from us, and it's stripped from us in everywhere. Like, again, not just in the world of the intellect or whatever, but it is everywhere. This attempt to hurry and to rush and to not take care. And then we end up cheating ourselves. And then, again, this does not help build the house of the intellect. And so what happens is we forget that this is even a value. And that's why I wanted to start with it up front, that this sense of dignity and integrity is, I don't want to say it's the only value or the core value, but it's certainly one of the most important ones, because there is no institution, there is no sure outside check that can tell you you're a member of the house of the intellect. One must build it oneself, particularly in today's environment. And one does that through behaving with and acting with integrity and dignity towards oneself. So what does that mean in action? Well, if you think about your media consumption of all kinds, and I'm just talking about books or whatever, I'm just talking about all kinds of media consumption, ask yourself, like if you're an athlete, one thing interesting to talk to athletes, like serious athletes who are really dedicated and find joy in their sports, generally speaking, they're really careful about what they put in their bodies. Often they either don't drink, or they drink very rarely or very little, or only in the off season. They hydrate, they watch their diet, they have this regular exercise of gym. And I always think that, wow, that's an interesting metaphor for our minds, right? Like if one of the things we're doing primarily is working with our minds, and I don't know, can I use the word soul? I hate the word soul, but our inner psychological and emotional and aesthetic world, what are we putting into it? What are we feeding it with? Are we giving it work that's going to help build that sense that we are valuable, that we deserve honor and respect? And you see this I see this as a problem because, again, our culture does not push this. Our culture pushes this notion of, watch something silly or stupid or pointless, and then you get points for being intellectually sarcastic, and you can rubbish it and you can tear it apart and you can say all the reasons this is a terrible thing, and then everybody applauds you and says, oh well, wow, look at that, look what a great beautiful job you did there tearing apart that terrible thing, and boy, aren't you smart. To which I say, well, no, that's a very stupid thing to spend your time doing, essentially. Now, it's not, it really is, because the question is, if all you're going to do is rubbish something, then what's the point? Like, this doesn't help you grow. This doesn't help grow your capacity. It does not show respect for yourself. It does not show respect for your mind and your heart and your capacities and your aesthetic sensibilities. You want to say, okay, and again, just as a note, I'll read anything. Like I'm a hopeless reader. I've said it before, but I certainly read too much, probably is my problem, and I'll read anything. But you want to make sure that, okay, what am I reading? How much of it is just like, oh, this is for fun, or this is just a trashy novel someone read me or sent me and said, hey, you should check this out, one of my friends or something, and how much of it is really things that move me in whatever way, or might move me, that might surprise me, or might deepen my understanding, or might expand my horizons, challenge my thought processes, really throw me for a loop. And if too much of what I'm reading is not of that caliber, then I'm just disrespecting myself. And recognizing like, oh, well, that was a trashy novel, ha, 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 which is great, right? Read a trashy novel, relax, let your mind go free, right? Like I said, I'll read anything. I love to read just as a process. But if I only read things like that, then all I'm going to do is fill myself with self-contempt, and I'm not behaving with dignity and integrity. I'm not honoring and respecting myself. And then when I talk to other people, what do I have to say to them? Oh, I read this trashy book, it's terrible. Does this give, am I respecting and honoring them? Am I acting in a way that extends dignity unto them? By the way, this is different from reading a book that people have said might be good, and you read it and you go, ooh, I don't know. To me, that doesn't seem very meaningful. This doesn't seem very helpful. Now you're in a dialogue. Now you're doing something serious, because you started from a very different place. But if you really go in with that idea, then that this is just going to be silly and stupid, and that's all that you're ever experiencing. You're just not honoring yourself. You're not acting with dignity towards yourself. And if you don't act with dignity towards yourself, it's hard to give other people the honor and respect they're due. If for no other reason, you just may not have it available, right? Because you haven't developed this as a mindset, as a pattern of behavior. And you can think about, again, it's not just books. If you think about, TV, movies, everything, the genre is sort of irrelevant. It's the question of what is the caliber of the material that you're ingesting, and does it help fill you with a sense of significance? Does it help elevate you? Does it inspire you? Does it, alter the way you think? How does this impute to you? What does it help you feel and grow and do? And if you have that as a behavior, and you have that, then you will feel this like, oh yeah, that was good. This does, make me feel better. This does make me feel more involved. This does make me feel more grounded. And then if you interact with somebody else, and then you do have something you can say, wow, this thing that moved me might move you. I extend to you the dignity and honor of being able to express, well, I had this moving experience, or I had this interesting idea come up in this text, and it may be interesting to you, right? Which is a very different conversation than, oh, I read this silly, stupid thing, and it was a silly, stupid thing. Now, this is not, again, it's not that you shouldn't read silly, stupid things, absolutely, but if that's all you read, then again, you're not respecting yourself, and you can't extend that to somebody else. And this I rarely see movies, and one reason is because so rarely do I find movies that I feel meet this standard, I guess, the standard of this. And when I do, I have to think about them for a long time. And then, so I don't have the desire to see another movie right away because I'm like, wow, I'm still trying to absorb and understand what I've just experienced. But I'm trying to work on my French here in France. And so I thought, oh, there's this movie, this animated movie playing called Flow. And it looked, I saw just a movie poster for it. And I thought, oh, that's in the theater is right by my house. So I thought, oh, I was walking by. So, oh, that would be a good one to see. I like animated movies. I'll probably be able to follow along because, my French is not that great. So this could be helpful and an easy way to do it. Let's try that out. So I went with a friend of mine, and it turns out that there's no speaking in it whatsoever. So as an exercise in learning French, this was not helpful. Although as an exercise in experiencing French culture, it was definitely insightful. However, because this was not an American movie. This was not an American movie, very French in its sort of aesthetic sensibilities, I would say. But what I did have is this astounding visual and musical sort of immersion in a world where none of the characters ever say anything. And so, of course, it's visually intense and quite moving and powerful. So I thought, wow, that was a great experience. Not what I was expecting, not what I was going in for, but really, I felt that was an enriching and enlivening experience. And if there was lots of things like Flow about, I would be more interested in seeing them, but I still wouldn't go that often because I do find it a bit overwhelming and I have to think about it a long time. And so really reflecting on what it is that we're taking in the way that athletes reflect on them, I think is one important aspect of thinking about the dignity and integrity. If I were a painter or a musician, same thing with music, same thing with art. What is it I'm exposing myself to visually? What am I listening to? What am I putting in my ears? It might be. I sometimes wonder if I'm an artist, if I want other art in my eyes. Right? I just don't know because I'm not that person. I'm not a visual person, so I don't know if it would clutter my mind and my heart for what I wanted to produce, or whether it would be inspiring. For me, I would guess if it worked the way it does with significant philosophers, I have to alternate. I have to read, take in, absorb, and then I have to not have it so that I have that time of reflection and compression and sort of, digestion of what I've taken in. And then I can kind of process it, take notes, and go, oh, okay. So I can imagine seeing art, being exposed to it, and then going, okay, now I don't want to see anything. No, I don't want that to be in my mind. But I'm sure it varies from artist to artist. I just don't know. Same thing I had a friend of mine who was a composer, classical composer, and he said he just can't listen to Beethoven. He loves Beethoven, absolutely loves Beethoven, but he says you listen to Beethoven and you're just completely disabled because you're like, puh, why bother, right? Like, there's no just listen. Like, don't write me. There's no use for more music after Beethoven, which is a bad idea, right? But I get the sensibility. You're like, oh, it's so great, it's so powerful, it's so wonderful. But it also runs completely counter to our civilization, to our society at the moment, which does not tell us this. Like, I had to stop listening to, when I was in the United States, I stopped many years ago listening to NPR because I realized that it's just such dross. It is absolutely unhelpful, short, ridiculous, uninsightful, uninspiring, just nonsense at such length and such continuity that what you think you're taking in as being valuable is really not. And I don't know if it's a rule of thumb, but one way to think about this is if the format is coming in like, oh, what's happening in the Middle East today, here's, a minute and 15 seconds. Well, this is not helpful. Like this, whatever you're about to hear in a minute and 15 seconds it's really not that helpful. It's not going to expand your mind. It's not going to deepen your understanding. None of these things are going to really help speak to, again, that sense of integrity and personal dignity. It may titillate, it might spark a moment of interest, but then that moment will go away. And so that shift that's taken place in our culture, if you can go back again to, say, something like a Bildungsroman, when these are the sort of educational stories that, they're all over European literature. Hence, I mean, there's a name for them, Bildungsroman, novels of education, but they tend to be coming to life, coming to age, these sorts of stories that have to do with the education system. And because when many of these were written in the late 19th century, early 20th century, the mass education model was brand new, it really enlightens part of this. How much does the individual conform to their educational environment? How much is the educational environment helping to elicit their individuality? Do they have to violate their own sense of personal integrity to be able to move forward? Or are they being held back by that? You have books like Unterm by Hermann Hesse, who is very negative on this because he felt like it would just destroy individuality and personal integrity. And again, I don't even know if academic integrity is even a thing anymore, right? Like when I stopped teaching at the college, it had pretty much gone away. And so if you're not learning in the sense of, were the teachers, not that there weren't good professors and good teachers, but that core sense of being true to yourself and being true to your subject matter and respecting your subject matter just didn't seem to be, viable. It wasn't something that people discussed anymore. It wasn't a significant consideration in the day-to-day practice of the other professors. And it's how would students get it? People always like to blame students again, but how are students supposed to imbibe these values if we don't see them modeled, if they aren't modeled by the people who are supposedly leading us in these institutions? I mean, we know when people are cheating us. We know when they're taking shortcuts. We know when the syllabus has just been downloaded from the textbook and everything is falling, and this is all automated, and it's all basically online and made very simple and very direct, and the papers are being auto-corrected, and my essays are being auto-read, and any kind of comment that varies from that creates all kinds of trouble and bad feedback. And you go, okay, well, this is not a system that has integrity, therefore it doesn't value integrity, then why would I develop a sense of personal integrity around that? And so that's what you want to look for, is both in yourself. That's the beginning, step one, is to look for that integrity in yourself and to build patterns into your thought processes, in your habits that allow you to develop that sense. Again, another place where you see this as being defeated is, and last example, then we'll move on to positive examples, is, I don't know, for some reason, you see these news stories and magazine articles, all this stuff online, passive income. And I've had people say this to me a couple of times in the last couple of months, passive income, which if there's anything, I can't, it's just so horribly, there is no dignity and integrity in passive income. I guess I'll just summarize it like that. One, it never turns out to be all that passive, right? But the idea is like, oh, you can get money for nothing. Like, okay, you can get money for nothing. Why does that create dignity? Is this a thing of integrity? Like, how would that build dignity or integrity? And the people who tend to be talking about this are telling you it's great. This is not something that they have as a value, right? The dignity and integrity and the value, what they want is money or fame or success, quote unquote success. But it is precisely that mindset that is soul crushing and works against the house of the intellect. In fact, again, Hermann Hesse seems to be topical, so we'll go with him. In Steppenwolf, his novel, often misread novel, but an interesting novel, he has the main character, Harry Haller, Hermann Hesse, right? Not a big, you don't have to be really bright to catch that this is just autobiographical. But, Harry Haller, the main character, is supposedly this outsider, and he's this bohemian and all this intellectual, so theoretically, and he lives on, and hence the Steppenwolf. He's the wolf that lives outside of society on the edge, but he lives on it. He says this himself in the novel, but he lives on the interest and dividends from bonds and stocks. So here he is, supposedly this outsider, this free thinking, this intellectual, this deep person of serious conviction, and yet he's sort of living again on the passive income, and he recognizes that it's killing him, right? Like this is deadly because it's not true to himself. This is not really who he wants to be. So in an environment where this is what you're told, like say, oh, read something that's easy. No, read something that gives you a sense of well-being and gives you a sense of enrichment. Right? It's not that confusing. Right? I don't understand why this is so hard to fathom, but we do really seem to struggle with this as a communal project. And so when we rob ourselves, and hence by extension, as I mentioned, I think just naturally by extension, other people of this sense of honor and dignity, it's very hard for the house of the intellect to thrive, because those works, and this is why classic works of philosophy, of literature, of music, of art that have survived for decades, centuries, millennia, are those that have proven for some reason that when you encounter them, enough people feel powerfully moved by them that they want to see them continue. They write about them, they express their admiration for them, they purchase them, they visit them, they see them. In some way, they're continually refreshed generation after generation after generation. And that encounter with the classics is what then feeds you and gives you that sense of value and enrichment, not because of anything particular that you can put your finger on, right? This isn't like, oh, you're getting a lot of vitamin B12 and that makes you feel good. But that's why these works have been selected, and they're different kind, right? There's not there's not one of these. There's a whole range, and not every work appeals to everybody, but a lot of them appeal to, again, enough people that they've survived against all odds, against the forces of history and the masses of other media that you would think would swamp them out. And so one way to start thinking about this positively is to go, oh, what are the things that I love that feed me, and how much time do I spend with them? And where are those works? So recently I went to the Louvre, and one of the advantages of being in France is the Louvre's not that far away, relatively speaking. But I'm like, oh my gosh, it was pretty much overwhelming. I mean, the Louvre is unimaginably large. If you haven't been, just brace yourself. Worth going, but wow. And there's so much art, and the rooms are so vast, and the place is so big, and it's filled with so many people and so much noise that at some point I'm just like, yeah, it's not that helpful. It's worth seeing, but it's just, for me at least, just overwhelming. But to encounter a single great works of art or a few great works of art and being able to meditate on them and see them, this to me is what fills me up and gives me that sense of power and of worth. And I go, oh yeah, this is a work that is definitely worthy of me. And the question that raises is, am I worthy of this work? And that's sort of where it comes from. And one aspect of this, again, that's I think rarely discussed, is now I should have looked up this quote because it just popped in my head, but somebody who I read at some point somewhere in history said, we don't choose our masters choose us. And what I took that to mean, and what I take that to mean today, is we don't decide what works and what writers and what philosophers and what music and which art is going to appeal to us. It chooses us. And if you read around and look around and listen around and spend time exploring, what will happen, I'm sure you've all experienced this, is you'll hit something and it just resonates with you powerfully. And those works, those writers or thinkers or painters or musicians, whoever it is, whatever the category of things that you're working with, philosophers, of course, that resonance is your master choosing you. And not that you should spend all of your time with these person or work or genre or whatever it is. But if you spend a significant amount of time, or what I do is I circle back. When I get confused, when I get lost, when I don't know what to do or what to read, I go, I'm just going to return to those classics that, for me, always resonate and fill me up. It's kind of like a fallback position. And what I've found is that really works, because we do get confused. We do get sidetracked. We do get lost, or at least I do. I'm assuming other people have similar experiences. And then you go, oh, now I know what to do. So one way to achieve this sense of dignity and integrity, and this is in this series, as I mentioned, I want to be a little more interactive and give a little bit more like a sense of homework, would be to ask yourself, one, keep a diary over a week, maybe 2 weeks, and say, what am I reading? What am I watching? What am I listening to? And then look at that, and does that meet your own standard of integrity? Does that meet your own standard of personal dignity? Like lots of great religious scholars of old, like they would read the Quran or the Bible or the sutras every day. And this was a way of reminding themselves and of enriching themselves, because they thought these are the great texts, these were the texts that were going to fill them. And they would read them every day for their entire lives, right? And, I'm not a big one for major religious texts, but that kind of model, I think, is quite apt, because that builds this sensibility of, oh, this is a valuable text. It's valuable for me to spend time with it. And so when I see individuals or reviews that say, the 200 best books of 2023 or 2024, we're at that time of year when they do lists, of course. It's like, well, that's 200. Like, what is the point of a list of 200 books or even 20 books? It's very difficult to sort through that many. And we have a society that values a lot. Oh, I've read 10,000 books, or I've read 1,000 books, or I'm going to read 500 books this year, or something like this. And it's like, you know what? If you can read half of a really great book that moves you profoundly and really opens your mind, or sets your heart beating, or gives you a sense of peace, like, holy cow, like, you just throw away those other 999 or whatever the number is you're supposed to be looking at, and just go reread that sucker, right? Or go revisit that. Or again, this is the seduction of the Louvre, which again, I don't want to rubbish the Louvre because it is amazing in many ways, but I really can't do anything with 13,000 pieces of art, right? It doesn't help me in any way. It just kills me. But maybe if I can encounter it with peace, and a sense of unhurriedness, one or two great works, and sit with them for a time, that I can process, that I can do something with, that can really, grow my heart and my mind. And that's why when you go through the Louvre, you'll see artists, groups of artists sometimes, and they're sketching one piece. And I'm like, right, just ignore the rest of this place. Pick one and spend a day or 2 or 3 days with it. Oh my gosh, I can't sketch. I can barely write my name. So, but if I were, that's what I would want to do. And so you just want to sit and just be with one piece and just sort of meditate with it and inhabit it and spend that time with it. Forget the other, again, 13,000 pieces, because I think that's where the richness comes from, and that sense of integrity comes from, the integrity of process. I'm not rushing. I'm not in a hurry. I'm not trying to complete something for some reason. So one assignment, if you don't want to call it an assignment, is to go, hey, what am I consuming really when I look at the time that I'm spending on this? Whatever it is to ask myself, am I being just to myself and my own capacities, or have I fallen into some habit of consumption that does not feed me? And again, this of course will be a personal measure, but it is something to look at. And then a second one is to say, okay, who now or who in the past has been my master or masters, right? Like who are the again, the writer, the thinker, the painter, the musician that I really appeals to me. And an assignment I've given myself many times, and which I can recommend, is choose one of those. For me, Henry James, Beethoven, Dostoevsky, Nietzsche, obviously, Socrates, these kinds of people. And what I've done is I've gone, okay, I really want to go deep. Like, I want to read a biography of them, a good quality. With better known of these people, there's often some really spectacular scholarly biographies that give you not just a sense of them, but also of their time and the intellectual currents and aesthetic sensibilities and, all of the historical material surrounding that. Spend time with one or two of the major works. If it's a novelist that you love, reread carefully one of their favorite novels. If it's a philosopher, pick a work and just really spend some time going through that work, kind of line by line. If it's a musician or a composer, spend some time with their work. But again, try and find the historical details. Try to fill this in. And often what happens to me is you get this depth, this sense of, you really start to incorporate that work more fully into your own life. And that, to honor yourself by spending time, by saying, I am worth spending time with Beethoven, right? I'm good enough to do that. That's respect, not for Beethoven, because he didn't need our respect. But although I think it is, but it's respect for ourselves. And then when you consistently tell yourself that, no, some of my time, not all your time, of course, it'd be too exhausting, but some of my time, it's worth me. I'm respecting me. I'm honoring myself by providing myself with this greatness and allowing it to have a place in my life because I'm great. That's how that sense of dignity and integrity starts to build a sense of belonging in a community with these great minds that come to us from history. So, House of the Intellect is a pattern of being. It's a way of life. It is not a degree or an honor or a position that one can hold that can be granted from the outside per se. And if enough people do this together, then you get this amazing communities that have formed throughout history. And I think something that we all long for, and that this is built through self-respect and a care for those great works, which will come up in a later lecture. And so 2 assignments to help us understand and explore that would be 1, what am I consuming? What does that look like if I track that? And 2, what great master can I revisit that I know will fill me? How can I deepen my appreciation? How can I deepen my experience? How can I explore that? Again, I always recommend histories, biographies, and then close, careful readings or more time spent with whatever the aspect of it that one really appreciates. And those elements, I think, combined will help you build this sense that you are the kind of person that you want to be, and that has the power and the integrity and the self-respect that can help galvanize a community. So lecture number 1, thank you very much. Stay tuned for more. Oh, and please, if you're interested, there'll be more assignments on the Patreon. And please, in your comments and questions, I'd be interested to see where people are going. Who are the masters they consider important? What works are they looking at? Who are they really exploring? Because I think that would be fascinating. Thank you very much.